Greetings, everybody. It's me, the Mick, and welcome back to another Warhammer 40K lore dump. Today, specifically, we're going to be talking about Sanguinius and the Blood Angels, and the things that are ingrained in all of their gene seed, the Black Rage and the Red Thirst. Quick for anybody who's not familiar with Space Marines or not familiar with Warhammer 40K, whenever I say gene seed or genetic, just understand that a gene seed is what makes a Space Marine, and it's directly pulled from the Primarch of whatever legion that Space Marine belongs to. That's why all of Sanguinius's Blood Angels look a lot like him. That's why all of Vulcan's Salamanders look a lot like him, and why Leon Russ all has a bunch of furry werewolf men charging into battle with axes, riding on gigantic werewolves. So if you couldn't guess, the Red Thirst means they have a desire to drink blood. And if you guess the skinny boys with super pale skin and long teeth weren't vampires from the get-go, especially with a name like Blood Angels, then I don't know what to tell you. You should probably take some literary awareness classes or whatever the hell it's called. I don't know. I'm just as stupid as everybody else on the internet. Sanguinius was actually aware that the Red Thirst was a thing since his inception, and was aware that all of the Blood Angels suffered from it. Granted, there wasn't many cases at all until the Great Crusade happened, and even then, in the beginning, it was just a very few. But as the Great Crusade continued to move forward, more and more instances of the Red Thirst taking over a Space Marine became more and more prevalent. In true fashion, instead of seeking help for any of this, Sanguinius hid this from his other brother Primarchs, and also hid it from Big Daddy E. Primarily, he wanted to do this because he didn't want his brothers, for some reason, to use this against him as some kind of leverage or shame. And he also didn't want Big Daddy E to just kind of stomp out the entirety of the Blood Angels Legion, including himself. Which kind of makes sense, because Big Daddy E was not a really good father figure. In fact, if you read some of the books, it shows that the Emperor didn't even see them as children. But that's a different episode. The Red Thirst still did count kind of as a battle frenzy. In fact, most of the time you hear Blood Angel stories about them charging into battle, sweeping across the battlefield, killing everybody, and then doubling back and then drinking all of the blood out of everybody. Although, in my opinion, that just seems like liberal propaganda. However, they did use it as kind of a battle stim, which is kind of like the meth chocolate bars during World War II. Yeah, a couple of squares are really kind of nice, but eventually you'll probably end up sucking dick for it in the back of some club in an alley somewhere. The urge to give into the Red Thirst does get worse as a Space Marine ages, which is probably why we saw a lot more of it towards the end of the Great Crusade, due to the fact that some of these Space Marines were probably getting older and sticking around long enough for it to actually start affecting them. All Blood Angels try to abstain as much as they can from the Red Thirst just because they know how easy it is for it to take over. That being said, it gives them some kind of weird nobility and humility, which honestly just kind of makes them sound like that one dude who goes to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, whose whole personality is the fact that he goes to Narcotics Anonymous. If a Blood Angel does fall to the Red Thirst, which a lot of them do, they are sent to the Tower of Emero, or Emerio, however the hell you're pronouncing it, which is basically like a prison tower where they hold all of the people who have succumbed to the Red Thirst or to the Black Rage, which again, we'll cover a bit later. Kind of like with the whole battlefield thing, there's a ton of stories of Blood Angels being sent to a really remote planet where no one really is, and it's kind of just them, and suddenly entire villages or sectors or cities would just kind of show up being completely abandoned, and no one's there, and then all of a sudden, all of the townsfolk just kind of show up, completely drained of blood one day. Dead, obviously. Now, some people say that this is the Blood Angels giving in to the Red Thirst, which again is liberal propaganda, aka chaos. Now that the Legion, though, is split into its own separate chapters, successor chapters, if you will, which you'll hear a lot more about if you do any kind of Warhammer lore dive at all. They kind of gave them on-the-nose names, such as the Flesh Terrors and the Blood Drinkers, which is a really good way to keep that whole gene seed defect under wraps, guys. Real good. Now, the Black Rage is completely unlike the Red Thirst in one aspect, which is it came about after the Horus Heresy and after the Siege of Terra, whereas the Red Thirst was with the Blood Angels from the very beginning. Essentially, the Black Rage turns the Blood Angels into that annoying barbarian character that sits at your D&D table, or that one guy at the bar that swears he sees red if he gets angry and he's already had way too much to drink. But instead of, swinging around wildly and just overall being obnoxious and then getting kicked out, the Blood Angels go into an absolute berserk war frenzy that they can almost never be controlled out of. Now, like I said, the Black Rage is a fairly new thing. In fact, it came about after Sanguinius was killed by Horus. Because Sanguinius was so psychically powerful, his agony and anguish and betrayal during that final fight with Horus and his eventual death imprinted not only on his gene seed that he had, but all of the gene seed of all of the Blood Angels who were currently alive in there. You might be asking, how and why is the Blood Rage still prevalent among newer Space Marines? Well, that's because after Sanguinius died, something else happened. All of the reserve gene seed that the Blood Angels had, or at least most of it, was completely destroyed and wiped out, which would have eventually led to the entire extinction of that chapter. So what did they do? They got the gene seed from a dead Sanguinius to then make more Blood Angel Space Marines. So now, not only are the older Space Marines still affected by the Black Rage, but that means all new Space Marines of the Blood Angels Legion are also going to be affected by this gene seed defect. The Black Rage is also unlike the Red Thirst, as this is not a constant gnawing desire that a Blood Angel will experience. Instead, it's more of like a kind of PTSD thing, except about an event that they were never a part of, but is somehow imprinted into them. And they start actually reliving that final battle that Sanguinius had with Horus themselves. In fact, there's kind of a running joke that once they experience the Black Rage, everyone is Horus. There's just Horus. Horus as far as the eye can see. Again, like succumbing to the Red Thirst, there's generally no coming back from the Black Rage. In fact, it's way less likely that a Blood Angel will come back from the Black Rage as opposed to the Red Thirst. There's some kind of weird loophole that if they drink enough blood, it's fine, but if they drink too much blood, it's almost like, that fine line between becoming an alcoholic or being an alcoholic and just somebody who enjoys drinking maybe just a little too much. Again, these Space Marines are taken to the Tower of Amarillo to be imprisoned, but they're not entirely just imprisoned. It's not as shameful to fall to the Black Rage as it is to fall to the Red Thirst, at least among the Blood Angels. In fact, it's kind of seen like, again, that high level of stress just kind of snaps and taps into that portion of the gene seed. There is a boon, sort of, to it. It does give them a lot of the powers and a lot of the ability that Sanguinius had while he was still alive, which a Space Marine is already powerful enough. You now give him a fraction of the power of a Primarch, and then also just uncontrollable hallucinations that there's Horuses everywhere, and you've got a recipe for disaster. Sure, he might be like blindly attacking anyone and everyone, but it's also kind of like a gorilla in full plate mail with a 12 gauge in your house. Yeah, he's kind of just going everywhere and doesn't really know what he's doing and is just fucking shit up by the same token, and probably like all over the place, but it's still a fucking gorilla with a shotgun. In order to maintain some of their honor, or at least give their brothers the ability to die honorably on the battlefield, these Space Marines who fall to the Black Rage are put in what's known as the Death Company, which again is a chapter within the Blood Angels Legion. They're put in black armor that has red crosses all over it in order to signify the injuries that Sanguinius had taken during the Siege of Terra and during his final fight with Horus. They're generally led by chaplains who are basically Space Marine popes, but they're extremely psychically attuned and can actually get through to these Space Marines in some sense of fashion so they can at least lead them into battle. Generally, it's like the most dangerous and the most suicide mission type things that any Space Marine can go through. because they don't want them running amok on a regular battlefield where there has to be tactics and some level of strategy. But again, they also want to give them that satisfaction of an honorable death. The weirdest part about the Black Rage to me that I kind of saved for last is that it, oddly enough, extends the Space Marine's life, which wasn't really a problem during the beginning of the Horus Heresy and the Great Crusade and the Siege of Terra, because all they had to really worry about was the Red Thirst. Sure, as they aged, it got worse, but now take an already expanded lifespan and tack on a couple hundred more years due to the Black Rage, and now you're contending with the Black Rage and the Red Thirst, so you've got two monkeys on your back that are only gonna get worse as you get older and as you see more battles and more fights. So it's kind of like a recipe for disaster with the Blood Angel Space Marines. Thank you all so much for watching. Enjoyed it at the very least. If you want to see more of this content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I try and post at least 3 videos a week, hopefully 2 of which are Warhammer 40K. Another one might be gaming. Go ahead and check out the Twitch for live streams that I like to do on Wednesdays and Thursdays, where I generally play a Warhammer 40K game, where you can ask me any questions that you want or any questions that you might have, either about the channel, myself, or just Warhammer 40K in general. Like the video and give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, or give it a thumbs down, but at least in the comments section, let me know how I can improve the video. Also, leave down in the comments section any other thing that you'd like to see me cover, whether that be a video game, or a specific sect, faction, or cool, neat thing that you just want to learn more about in Warhammer 40K. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.